The bride's veil trembled as the wheels of her chair caught on the edge of the carpet, and her eyes shimmered with the kind of tears that came from being abandoned in the very moment she was meant to be cherished. The struggling single dad stood frozen, his work-worn hands still holding the tray of water glasses he had been serving, his breath catching as he saw her shoulders shake under the weight of silent humiliation. His heart hammered with memories of hospital rooms, his late wife's fading smile, and the daughter he was raising alone, a daughter who had once been told she might never walk again. In that instant, the room blurred, and all he could see was pain, dignity, and a soul trying not to break. Without thinking, he set the tray aside, stepped forward, and slowly lowered himself onto one knee before her, his voice trembling as he whispered, "You're my miracle," though he didn't even know her name yet. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name right now. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. He hadn't planned to be at that wedding. He hadn't planned most of what his life had become. Once, he had dreamed of opening his own carpentry shop, building handcrafted furniture that would last generations, but life had unfolded differently. His wife's sudden illness had devoured their savings, and after she passed, he had been left with unpaid medical bills and a little girl who clung to him each night, terrified he would disappear too. He worked 3 jobs just to stay afloat, early mornings unloading delivery trucks, afternoons repairing whatever neighbors could afford to pay him for, and nights serving at events where people celebrated milestones he could no longer imagine for himself. The exhaustion was constant, but he carried it quietly, because fathers like him didn't get to rest. They just kept going. The wedding hall that night shone with golden lights and music, and he moved through it like a shadow, invisible among polished shoes and glittering gowns. He noticed the bride even before her moment of heartbreak, not because of her wheelchair, but because of the way she smiled at everyone, as though determined to celebrate, despite the whispers he could overhear. Some guests avoided looking at her, others stared too long, and he could feel the sting of their judgment like heat in the air. He thought of his daughter, who still used crutches on difficult days, and he wished people understood that strength sometimes rolled instead of walked. When the groom suddenly stepped back from the bride, face twisted with embarrassment, muttering excuses about not being able to go through with it, the murmurs turned sharp. Guests shifted, shocked but unwilling to intervene. The bride's lips trembled as she blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that finally escaped and slid down her cheeks. The groom walked away, leaving her stranded in front of everyone, a spotlight of cruelty burning down upon her. The struggling single dad felt something inside him crack, not just sympathy, but a deep, familiar ache. He remembered doctors telling his wife she had become a burden. He remembered the way she had cried when she couldn't lift their daughter anymore. He remembered promising he would never allow anyone to be made to feel less than whole. So he kneeled. Not to propose, not to pretend, but to shield her from the shame threatening to engulf her. In that moment, he wasn't a server, or a man scraping by, or someone who didn't belong in rooms like this. He was a father, a widower, a man who knew the value of dignity. The bride looked at him, startled, her tears pausing as if unsure whether they still belonged. He lifted his head and met her gaze with steady warmth, and she exhaled shakily, as though someone had finally reminded her she was human, not broken. The room went silent. Guests watched, uncomfortable, unsure how to react now that someone had stepped into the space they were afraid to fill. The pianist's hands hovered over the keys, and then, almost reverently, he began to play again, a softer, slower melody that wrapped around the moment like a blanket. The bride's parents rushed forward, but instead of pulling her away, they placed trembling hands on the single dad's shoulders, their eyes glistening with gratitude. It was as if his simple gesture had changed the atmosphere from humiliation to reverence. The bride's story soon unfolded in whispers around the hall. She had been in a tragic accident a year earlier, losing the ability to walk just months before her planned wedding. The groom, who once promised forever, had stayed beside her until the ceremony, but fear, vanity, and weakness stole his courage when he saw the crowd staring. Yet here, kneeling before her, was a man who had nothing, offering everything that mattered. He didn't know that his act would be captured on dozens of phones, shared across social media, or that people around the world would be moved to tears by a man in a worn uniform kneeling as though she were royalty. By morning, his life had changed. His daughter watched the video, eyes sparkling, saying she had never been prouder. Messages poured in from strangers, offering him work, kindness, opportunity. One message stood out, from the bride herself. She wanted to meet him again, not out of obligation, but because she felt something shift inside her that night, something she thought she had lost forever, the belief that she was still worthy of love, respect, and wonder. The single dad brought his daughter with him when they met, and the three of them talked for hours, not about tragedy, but about healing, resilience, and finding beauty after everything had fallen apart. Months passed, and the bond deepened in ways none of them expected. The bride began physical therapy with renewed determination, inspired by the little girl who limped but smiled, who fell but laughed, who tried because she believed her mother watched from heaven. The single dad found steady work through someone who had seen the video, finally allowing him fewer exhausting jobs and more time with the people who mattered. The three of them celebrated small victories, a step without support, a dinner at a table instead of takeout on the couch, laughter that filled the spaces where grief once lived. They didn't rush anything, didn't label what was growing between them, but the world seemed gentler, as though fate had finally exhaled. Near the end of the story, years later, on a quiet afternoon filled with sunlight, the former bride, now stronger, still in a wheelchair but full of confidence, took the little girl's hand and whispered that she had become family long before she realized it. The struggling single dad looked at them both, eyes wet, heart full, and he understood that miracles didn't always arrive with grand announcements. Sometimes they came disguised as heartbreak, only to reveal themselves through kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep emotional and inspirational stories alive. Before we finish, please comment below and tell us whether you believe that a single act of kindness can change a life forever.